Hi guys, welcome to another episode of The Spotlight with KB. I am your host, Cristiana, and in this episode we're talking about homelessness in the Salinas Valley and mental health. It is May and it is a month of mental health awareness. So that said, what better person to bring on to talk and have a conversation about these topics than someone who deals with people and that are in that field in a homelessness situation. And Melissa Morales, this is my cousin, my friend, someone I deeply admire, someone who is working for an agency in the Monterey County that provides homeless outreach and brings in resources and information to those people and gives us another perspective, another point of view of the homeless situation here. In the first episode, if you've been following, we talked to an officer, a law enforcement officer who gave us his insight, his perspective, but we all got to see other stories, other sides, and that's what this podcast is all about. It's about sharing knowledge, sharing insight, and bringing the community together, having a platform where the community can come together and discuss important topics, important matters. And nonetheless, Melissa Morales, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Kenya.
Of course, I appreciate you. I know your time is valuable. So honestly, thank you so much for making the time to come on here. And it's not easy talking about certain things like this, but I do appreciate it. So yeah, thank you.
No problem. I think it's a topic that it'd be good to hear different perspectives.
Definitely. And for those that don't know you very well, can you give us a little intro of what you're doing right now?
Yeah. So for the last year, it's actually just been 1 year this month that I've been currently doing homeless outreach for a mental health agency. Before that, I was in the mental health field. I went to school for psychology and always been passionate about that. But when I heard that there was such a thing as outreach programs, I thought I could do that. Who else is going to?
Right.
Somebody has to do this job, get folks connected, especially people who have certain qualities like
Definitely.
I do, and the police officers, they have certain qualities that provide them the ability to do their job. It's a very tough job as well. So I think that I just felt like I could do it. I wanted to do it. I wanted to get people connected, help out in any way that I could.
Wow.
So that's what I've been doing for the last years.
Yes.
Some homeless outreach, especially here in Salinas. My office is based here in Salinas, but we can go throughout Monterey County as well. Yeah.
I love that. And I think the number one quality that people need to be in this type of job is love, and that's something that this podcast, that's the, some of the theme that you're going to see. Love is something that people need nowadays, and we don't see it much.
Yeah.
We don't see, when you have love, you kind of have to be a little more open to what the other person is going through, and sometimes we close up and we don't care, and we've seen that in America, with the police brutality or the topics of the BLM and that context and all that things that have happened in 2020. We saw a lot of division, right? And that's because there was no care or love for the individual, for people. And being able to open up, sit down and understand, hear you out, listen, that's something that's very valuable and it's important. And now I hope we bring that, and this podcast helps, kind of bring that awareness or spark that consciousness, like I like to say, and bring light into these dark matters,
Yes, because especially after COVID, people need to make a living. We need to work and, receive a paycheck. But in certain jobs like this that you're seeking, conversation about, we're not just there for the paycheck.
Definitely.
We're there because we're passionate about this, what we do. We're passionate about people. We love people. We want to spread that. If it was about the paycheck, I would be seeking something else. But that's not what we're here for.
Yes, I love that. So let's get started. We're going to talk about homelessness and mental health, of course. Again, it is May, Mental Health Awareness Month. And but first, you mentioned something very important, and I loved the definition of homelessness. Can you give us that definition? Can you talk about that?
Yes. So the HUD, the U.S. website for Housing and Urban Development, defines literally homeless as an individual or family who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, meaning they have a primary nighttime residence that's a public or private place not meant for human habitation. Something I would consider not meant for human habitation would be like a vehicle, a tent, a structure, or maybe possibly, I would argue, some may argue, even overcrowding in a single room, which often we see, people paying up to $1,000 just to rent one room that others are in as well.
Or a garage, right?
Also, if they're living in a shelter, could be congregate shelters, transitional housing, hotels or motels that are paid for by somebody else. Or if somebody is exiting an institution that they resided for less than 90 days, let's say an institution like incarceration, rehab, etc., and who resided in an emergency shelter or place not meant for human habitation before they entered that institution. So that's just a definition of literally homeless. There's other definitions that the website provides if people are curious about. If I hear the term chronic homelessness, what does that mean? Or if I hear
I don't know the term for that, but
at risk of homelessness.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, sorry.
Cool.
So if somebody were curious about the definition of at risk of homelessness or chronic homelessness, if these are terms that they hear, they can go onto the HUD website, the U.S. Housing and Urban Development website, for more resources. But I did want to touch on literally homeless because that's something that we can mostly talk about today.
Thank you for touching on that. I will, if you can provide me the link, I'll also link it on YouTube on the caption so people can check it out. That said, this is a podcast for the Salinas Valley. It's by residents, for the residents. You are a Gonzales resident. And something I wanted to ask you, every time I go, to visit and everything, I don't see, people walking around in carts or homeless people, asking for money in the corners. So I'm thinking there's no homeless in Gonzales. Do you, as a resident, do you agree? Can you let me know if there is? What do you think about that?
It is more rare in Gonzales. Being that I live there, I do see sometimes people come through and they may stay for a few days that are street homeless. But it is much less common because we don't have encampments in Gonzales. I would probably attribute not being encampments in Gonzales to not being so many resources. There are not a lot of resources in Gonzales, whereas there's no DMV if they needed, an ID. There's no food pantries and other resources where there's no shelters for sure. So you don't see encampments in Gonzales really. But there are a lot of individuals, like I said, who may be literally homeless, maybe couch surfing, have the support of friends, family, or other people who give them some space to stay. Or oftentimes we do hear a lot of, crowding in garages. And
so
ideal.
That
still
makes sense.
Not ideal.
Yeah, that makes sense. And given the definition you just gave us in the beginning, it does make so much more sense because although we don't see it, it doesn't mean it's not there. And I actually do know some people that are in those situations. Yes. So that clears it up a little. Yeah. And I think that's important because if we're going to have this conversation, we need to understand what is to be clear, know?
A really recent and shocking statistic that I heard from Gonzales is that our school district has more unhoused homeless students than some other neighboring districts such as Soledad.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, that was a shocking
compared to Soledad.
Okay. Our most recent statistic that I've heard from our student services and from the Soledad board was that Gonzales does have a higher number of students who are homeless, experiencing homelessness. So that was a big shocker because, like you said, we don't see it as much, but we do have these issues that go on in all of our Salinas Valley towns.
That's incredible. I can't believe that. What do you think is the reason why? Like, there's these students, these are young people. Why would you think that this is happening?
There could be a lot of reasons that, of course, their parents or parent may be going through, or something that I've seen on this one website that I want to share with you, where I saw the statistics of Monterey County.
Yeah, we'll link that too on YouTube.
It's that 50% of these conditions that lead to homelessness could be financial issues, so job loss, eviction, things of that sort. 29% could be incarceration. And a lot of these students have parents one or more parents who are incarcerated. 23% conditions that lead to homelessness are mental health issues. 22% are legal issues. 21% are divorce, separation, and breakup. Wow. And 34% are alcohol or drug use, which is also an addiction that people struggle with, that, of course, they don't want to put their children through, but it's just a consequence that happens, afterwards. So I think a lot of what I see in Gonzales is the financial aspect of it. We do have a lot of immigrant families, a lot of migrant families, and some parents that, maybe undocumented, and if they become injured, there's no way that they can receive disability or other financial supports. So there are some ways, if you have children, Monterey County does provide some financial resources, but it would not be enough. It would not be enough to get your own apartment and to have your own space for your children. So that's why a lot of times we see that there's families going through this, especially in Gonzales.
Wow. And that leads to my question, how do you implement your experience and education in this homeless outreach that you do? Because you do that right now for an agency here in Monterey County. How do you do that?
I think a lot of my knowledge of that is what I've learned through working with certain families, through working with certain clients, being in the field. But one thing that the mental health agency that I do work for taught me a little bit about, and this is touching on the mental health aspect, is deinstitutionalization. So deinstitutionalization, it's a long word, but it happened a while ago where there was these laws passed that had good intentions, a lot of asylums, a lot of psychiatric hospitals kept people there against their will if they had a mental disorder or developmental disability. And in the late 20th century, they were closing them because they wanted to deinstitutionalize people. So instead of taking away their autonomy and just forcing people to be in these spaces, they wanted, the idea was let's let these folks out and provide them resources so they can, be just within our communities. That's, things didn't happen. There weren't enough resources, and a lot of people fell through the cracks. And so something that my agency taught me was that things like this are why we may see a lot of clients in the field who have severe mental illness. And
because they're the ones that fell through the cracks.
Yes, the idea of deinstitutionalization was, okay, let's let them out, but then out there what,
there's not much resources for all of them, am I assuming?
How is everyone going to get their treatment, their medication, counseling, all the supports that they might have received in asylums, which we're not saying that those were the best places. I'm sure that there was a lot going on in there that wasn't that was inhumane. But then once people were out, then what? So a lot of what we do see in the field is some severe mental illness that they need to get connected to the resources, to the treatment, and then all of the other aspect of it that is not mental health related, that is county related or resources related. I really learned that on the spot. So even though it's been a year, working in this field, I'm learning as I go too. Yes. And I'm hearing new resources or hearing other resources that are dwindling.
Yes.
And so where people might think oh, well, there's this program, why don't they just get connected to that? A lot of things change. Funding comes and goes. So there's not always these resources to connect people to. I have to try to learn as much as I can for each client. Every client is case by case basis,
It's different.
Yeah, so very difficult, but I think my experience of mental health helped in some ways, but I don't have all the experience to know of all the county resources and stuff, and that's what I'm learning as I go too.
Wow. What does a regular day look like when you're doing this homeless outreach?
Regularly, we'll let's say on a weekly basis, we'll go to different encampments. Especially here in Salinas, there's several, and they're big. So, or South County, you know, I might go once or twice a week. So typically we'd prepare by gathering food, waters, hygiene products, clothes, whatever we have available. Some weeks we have less than others, but we'll gather all of that. We'll go, you know, very modestly dressed.
Right.
I'm not going to go in like some very
like high heels or
yeah, I might be wearing like my boots and some hiking boots or something, because of the terrain out there. It might be muddy in some encampments and stuff. So when we get to the encampments, we present ourselves. We're like, you know, hey, you know, we're with this agency. This is my name. Is there anything that you need right now? Can I get you connected to anything? A lot of it is building rapport with folks in the encampments, just them getting to see us, getting to know us, knowing that we're here to provide them with food and water and basics, because they're not going to care if like we have a project if they don't have an idea, you know, like, well, there's this, you know, this project coming up that, you know, we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that, and the state gave us this much funds and the county gave us this much funds.
They don't care.
They know already the barriers that it takes to get there, so we have to come with that too. And we have to come with, you know, ID vouchers, you know, get them connected to Social Security and get them some sort of income or something to even possibly qualify for certain programs, because like I said, like resources dwindle, and and they have tried it before, and if they've gotten cleaned up and their area got swept, they might have lost their ID, and that's such a basic thing to need. Is
so that goes kind of like I see it's kind of like the opposite of what law enforcement is doing. They're pushing them out, and it could be kind of a consequence, right? If they're pushing them out, they throw away their stuff, and I know it hurts
That's all their belongings.
I know it sucks for the job that they have to do, but yeah, maybe
they're doing their job. I understand that, you know, because there's different jurisdictions. Like there's some areas, some encampments that may be city jurisdiction, some that may be the state, some that may be the train tracks, the Union Pacific, some that may be private property. They're doing their job, and they have to do as they're told, but people don't understand and realize that that is all of their belongings that they're throwing away in the trash. I can't imagine if somebody came to my space and took everything and threw everything away.
And that's the hard part, that they don't have a space, you know, like that they're going in someone else's property or whatever the case is, but it's not theirs, and that's sad. Like I'm trying to put myself in their shoes. Like there's no space that belongs to you that you own, and that kind of I'm sure it does affect their mental health.
Yes, and it's very traumatizing.
Yeah, so I feel like it's like a brutal cycle.
Exactly. It's very discouraging. So somebody who might have been doing well, like getting job interviews and getting all their things gathered, their vital documents, and then their things get swept. And they were just struggling with depression not too long ago. Sometimes they don't know what else to do but to cope.
That's a good perspective.
You know, yeah,
I do.
It can get very, very deep and very dark fast, but it's very difficult to even maintain a car. Like if you had a vehicle, it's hard to pay for the tags, like all these payments that you have to make all the time. So then all their items in that car might get towed as well. And or if you're parked somewhere where you don't feel safe, you want to stay up all night, right, to protect your things, to protect yourself. There's sometimes that people use just to stay awake.
Wow.
And the people think like, oh, you know, they relapse all the time, like they don't, you know, care to get sober. Wow. It might be like a survival mechanism.
You know, wow, let's talk about a little bit about that, about mental health. And sometimes they have to use like it. That's kind of true. Like you do have to put yourself in their shoes. Sadly, a lot of people, we may be too privileged or to kind of understand, out of touch. I was there. That's why this podcast exists.
Yeah,
I was that person. So I'm speaking for me. And those people that, you know, are honest enough and real enough to be like, yeah, like I was that person that was in a little safe bubble. But now this podcast, I hope, brings insight and awareness and sparks that, you know, that love. you know, for these people. It reminds me a little bit when you touched on, like, just to stay awake, to protect their belongings. Yes. Maybe truck drivers, you know, in transportation, we see it a lot, you know, guys, I feel so bad. They have to provide for their families. Sometimes the last resort is to use a drug to stay awake. Or those energy drinks even, you know, those energy drinks.
And that could be where it starts. What if that truck driver has an injury and they're dealing with so much pain, but they cannot miss work because they have to provide or they have to keep a roof over their head. So to cope with that pain, they have to use a medication, and then from that medication, they're out of that medication, they can't afford it, they have to seek something else. And we see that all the time in the field.
Just a cycle.
It can go from one day to the next. It can escalate, and it could be any one of us at any time. That's a big reason why I think that I can empathize with people, is that I don't see them as, oh, some trash I gotta pick up, or oh, something, you know, that's like trespassing or burden. You know, I think about each individual case, and they each have their own stories.
You get to know them. Yes. You get to know them, why they're there, because they're not there just because they didn't choose that. I'm pretty sure they didn't choose that. That leads, you know, to the next thing. What's the worst thing you have seen out in this field? Like, how did that make you feel?
I can't pinpoint the worst thing. I have seen a lot of things, like, you know, pregnant women, children visiting their parents, people with disabilities that may be surrounded by so much trash and bugs. And I've seen a lot of things like that. But another pretty horrible thing I saw in the field one day was in the Soledad encampment, and one of our clients had a baby kitten, and the kitten was screaming and crying because it had gotten stuck in some nopales. So I had a bunch of little espinas, and she was like, Melissa, like, I don't know what to do. Like, can you please help me? And so I'm there, like, taking out espina by espina and trying to, like, stop this little baby kitten from crying. And some of the espinas that I took out helped. So I was like, let me keep going. Let me keep taking out these espinas. But while I'm doing this, they're telling me just very casually about how that night, before I had gotten there, because we go in the morning, that night there had been a shooting at the encampment, and somebody random just came to the encampment, somebody that wasn't staying there, and shot at the tents. And another female client had told me that she was just like, I just don't know what to do. Like, I'm just in my tent, like, you know, what can I do? Just drop and just wait till these gunshots stop as well. I don't know what happened. I don't know why. But you know, could be anything. But
it's dangerous.
Yeah, I didn't know, and I'm there just like, oh well, I'm here now. Like,
so that same night,
the night before, so I'm just like, you know, thinking already, like, if something happens right now, like, what do I do?
You're there already. Like, what do I do?
Yeah. We do go in groups. You know, we do have buddy systems, so we cannot leave anyone alone. But regardless, it's like things can change every day. You know, things can happen at any time. But honestly, I don't feel unsafe with my clients. Our clients know that we're there to help. They work with us. They trust us. If anything, they give us a heads up sometimes, and they're like, hey, you know, like, it's getting pretty, you know,
wow, they tell
busy.
You, like,
yeah, like, I wouldn't recommend you guys coming. You know, they'll give us a heads up. I mean, obviously,
the people
they're
that
good people.
live there,
people in encampments, they'll give us a heads up.
I mean, they're humans, right?
Yes. And they're not just dangerous criminals.
Yes, and that's something that I had to change, you know, my mentality in that aspect, where it's like they, you know, like, poor guys, whatever, blah, blah. But it's like, no, like, they have a story.
Yeah.
They're human.
We don't know why
they have feelings. Yes.
Yeah. What I've seen is, you know, sometimes folks who are undocumented who are struggling with an injury and can't work, or it's seasonal, and they, you know, don't have the supports to couch surf or to stay with somebody or rent a room. I see oftentimes people who have just gotten out of prison. I've heard that there were resources for, you know, halfway houses. There's not enough resources out there, so a lot of people they just don't know where to go.
So that leads to the next question, like, is it working? Do you have enough resources? But you just said you guys don't have much.
I think that people try, you know, governments try to provide resources where they can, but there's always something. And something that our clients will tell you is that there's just barriers. Like, they do try, you know, our clients, they don't want to be out there, so they're trying. They're like, okay, what do I need to, what requirements, you know, can I get into this program? Okay, I'm in this program, and then what? And then what? And so those are the things that I think we have to work on is, yes, there are resources out there. Some of them may dwindle away and we lose a lot of good resources. Some of them are new, and, you know, we got to work on that. But then what are the barriers? Like, how do we address the barriers? Because that is why a lot of people fall through the cracks.
And by barriers, do you mean like what is stopping the resource from like following through the progress?
So, for example, where someone can say, you know, if they can't work because of a disability and so they need income to stay somewhere, of course, we always need income. Like, there, first of all, if we're talking about resources, there's not enough shelters out there. And I do want to touch on that. You know, we hear that people may come from other counties to seek shelter in Monterey County.
Right.
I'm like, what shelters? Like, what space? You know,
we don't have space.
Yes, especially for South County. So
tell me about that.
Yes. Wow. So the only family shelters, and let's just talk about families right now. The only shelters for families that I can think of right now, there's one new one in Monterey, another one in Seaside for families, and think about like people that are in South County and their children are enrolled in these schools. How can you transport all the way to Monterey, all the way to Seaside all the time, right? So transportation.
That'll be hard. Yeah.
I'm sure there's wait lists for that. I know there is. And then there's one in Salinas. That wait list is at least 6 months long for families. There is another shelter that accepts men and women in Salinas, and that one has beds. But that one only accepts Salinas residents because of their funding. They're limited to because of certain funding. So if you are a single woman, where are you going to go? If you are a single male in Soledad, where are you going to go? And that's something I would really want to advocate for is more shelters in South County. Yeah, more shelters even in Salinas, but something in South County. I can't think of one shelter, one emergency shelter in South County.
And that does remind me, like what you said, the definition, we go back to what it means to be homeless. And in South Monterey County, you know, if you're a resident there, you know, if you know, you know. There's people living in garages, there's people living in small rooms, and it's very sad to see that it's a lot of people. I had people tell me when they were like friends, realtors, that they would list a house or something for sale, and they would see closets that were used as stoves. For these people, you know, that was like their kitchen in the closet of a room, and it's crazy because this is our reality.
Does that sound like an adequate residence?
No, definitely not. And these are rentals. These are properties that are being rented,
and a lot of the landlords or homeowners, even they need to make their mortgage payments. You know, so they're like, how can I let me rent out some room, let me rent out the unit in the back.
Exactly.
It's so hard out there, even for homeowners, even for renters. It's very hard out there. So when I was going to touch about income was, what if you cannot work and you have a disability? So people will say, well, just get on Social Security. Do y'all know how long it takes? No. And in that time, no. And in that time, what do? You know, because if you want to rent someplace, don't you need a rent deposit, utilities, all these things? So even that's what I mean about barriers.
Oh my goodness. All of
we may have
what you're doing. Those cracks, those people that are falling through those cracks, that's who you're helping.
Or that's who I'm trying to help. But it's also it could be hard for us, and I don't want anyone to lose hope and to just be like, oh, you know, it's not going to happen for me. Let me just give up because of all these barriers. Let's keep trying another way. You know,
and that's the thing. How do you deal with that? The emotional part of it, because you have to separate your own emotion, right? And you're trained for that too, you know. And I feel like just like law enforcement, they're trained to do a job, and they have that gift, that, you know, that calling, that purpose of law enforcement and defense and all that. And with you guys, it's a whole different level too. I feel like it's more, you know, it's a mental war, you know, spiritual war. Like you're there, and you have to separate too, because I feel when you take the burdens off, and this is something I constantly say, and you're gonna hear me say, like, you're not, people are not God, you know, we cannot take everybody's burden. How do you deal with it, like the emotional part of it?
It is difficult. If I'm the type of person who can cry for strangers on TikTok, if I see like a cute video, or I watch a movie and I get very emotional. I do connect with people and their situations. So when I'm out there working my 40 hours, it's hard. It's hard not to get emotional and to feel for everyone, for what they're going through. Right. The only way that I think I can describe coping with it is kind of trying to separate, to compartmentalize my job with my reality, my life outside of work.
Your personal life.
Because there's only so much that we can do in 40 hours a week. So outside of those 40 hours, I really do try to just, reassure myself, like, okay, let's think about it. Let me turn off my phone right at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. Let me, try to do something else to distract myself. I think that's a big thing, is I really try to distract myself. But even then, I catch myself in these thoughts. Like, if I am at the gym, I feel so much guilt. And I'm like, my clients can't be at the gym right now.
Oh my goodness.
They don't have, a gym membership, or they can't like be cycling right now, or
so walking, you feel that
walking empathy on the beach. Like, yes, I do feel so much guilt when it comes to things outside of work. And that's what I try to compartmentalize and to put away and to detach from work, to really try to not think about it, which is horrible, because it's like, sometimes we may see somebody asking for money, and you don't want to dwell on that moment, because then you're just going to be thinking like, damn, like, I'm out here eating a $20 meal and they're asking for $2.
Yes.
So it's very tough. It's very tough. Like,
and that goes to the last episode. I know I asked you not to watch it, so you give me all your full perspective.
Yeah, I'll watch it after.
Yes, you'll watch it after. But that way you don't have bias. That's why I asked her not to watch the last episode, so when she comes on and talks about this, I don't want her to have any bias and just give her perspective. But that said, in the last episode, I had mentioned something about how I feel guilty. I want to give them money. Now I have everything on my phone. Like, I just tap. And I feel bad because sometimes, we struggle, people that are out there that are driving, that are getting their meal and all that. And maybe, we're saving money, to be homeowners later, or whatever the case is. It's very hard to help others. Yeah. So how can people that may not maybe be able to contribute financially, how can people help, if it's not financially?
I think that's a good question, because I constantly think about that too. I never carry cash. I'm like, I will pay in good vibes, like, if somebody doesn't accept that,
hi. My husband says hi, God bless you. But that I don't. Yeah. But I feel like that's hypocritical.
Luckily for me, I can be like, okay, I'll come back when I'm working, and I'll provide what I can. But when there's other ways that I feel like I can support too, like donating, socks and clothes and a lot of things, instead of throwing them away, I go donate as much as I can, like from even things that I've used, and I'm like, I don't really use this, like, somebody else could benefit from this, or blankets. And
would you give them to them, like,
I could just directly? You could just drop them off at like Goodwill or anything like that, or you can give them directly, like, if you have the ability, and you see folks that are around your neighborhood, let's say, like, you see them often, you'd be like, oh, hey, how are you?
Get to know them.
You get to know them, like, are you hungry? Have you eaten today? Because like, if I am getting lunch and I know that somebody hasn't eaten today, I'll just get another meal,
right,
in those moments. I know that we may be struggling other times, and those times, of course, I may be like, well, I can't help right now, but I will. I know where my heart is. And I know that some people might believe that. I've heard this from some of my own family members, and it hurts to hear, is that they'll be like, well, I'm not going to give anyone anything because they're just going to use it for drugs or something.
Yes, I've heard that a lot. I've heard that a lot. Like, we hear that a lot. One time there was a person, I don't know who this person was, but they had mentioned, I can't recall who they were that told me this, but they had mentioned that they were giving money to a homeless individual, food to a homeless individual, and he's like, he threw it out. He's like, I don't want to eat. I want, give me some money. So like, he said directly straight up that he wanted to use drugs. So in that case, I'm like, I'm sure there's people for everything, you know?
Yeah. Like that may be that one person, maybe he already ate. And he's like, honestly, I am withdrawing right now, and I feel like I'm gonna die if I don't have you know, my substance.
That's an interesting take.
You know, like they might have just eaten and they're like, hey, I don't need this. Like, can you give me some money? Like the only thing right now that would make me feel better physically, because we don't always know what it's like to withdraw from a certain substance. You know, so I can understand that person too. And so to that, I would say to people that, you know, believe those things, I understand where you're coming from, but also I wanted to tell a story really quickly about, and this may be like a common story. I don't know if it's a biblical story. I don't know. I've heard it from
tell me.
From like family members.
Enlighten me.
Family members have told me, you know, of this story of a woman who she would always, you know, give people food. She would donate all her time at church. She would give back to the community and donate to certain charities, and even give people like in other countries funding and stuff like that. Some people do that and they don't provide funding or like assistance to their own family members, you know. So it's a lot of it may be like for perspective or for an image, but where I'm going is that this woman that in particular that, you know, she donated all this food and like resources and stuff. She had a neighbor who she would see had a lot of men over all the time, and men would come in and out, different men. And so she would constantly talk about this woman to others. She would, you know, say like, okay, this woman, you know, she's a sex worker, and she's
gossip, in other words.
She would gossip about this woman, and she would like, oh, she's like a nasty woman, you know, she talk bad about this woman, judge this woman. So the story goes that she dies and she's trying to go to heaven. And she's like, why am I not in heaven? I'm not the best storyteller, but she's like, why am I not what's going on? You know, I was such a good person, like I go to church all the time, like why am I not? And then the story goes that God is like, well, you know, you may have done all these things, but I know your heart, and I know that really you were judgmental of this woman, and you don't know this woman's situation. Oh my goodness. Where that might be her only last resort to do these things, to make ends meet, to provide food for her children. Wow. That woman might be getting into heaven. You know, maybe that woman never judged you or never judged others.
There's a lot of scripture on it, you know, biblically, for those people that are like me, Christians, and we love the word of God. We love God. There's so much out there, my goodness, just stories like that. Yeah. And it confirms the heart of God. He's seeking people that love him, that are true worshipers, true people that love him. If you have love, you're helping these people, but you know, but you're not judging the person that's not like you. You know what I'm saying? That's the difference between a person who's real, authentic, and has that real love of God, versus someone who is just doing it for an image to feel better, perhaps. And that makes so much sense. And I believe that's a very good story. And I really do think it depicts the actual personality of God. You know, he is love. And a lot of people may argue, you know, everybody has different interpretations of God.
A lot of people do overlook scriptures like that. Yeah,
they do.
And I think that
they go to church every Sunday and they won't help their neighbor. Yeah, they won't love.
And they say Jesus this, Jesus that. But what is really Christ-like would be lending a helping hand, would be providing, providing the support that you can. Doing it. Exactly, and not judging people, and not judging. You know, we know we cannot judge others,
and we need to know. That's a good one. Maybe that'll be another episode one day. But judgment, what judging is. I feel like we need it, but people don't understand how to use it. Do you get me? Okay. You need to have good discernment. You need to understand the type of judging you're doing. Do you get me? Are you gossiping? Or are you telling your sister, hey, you're kind of going the wrong way, sister. Like, maybe let's do this, or maybe do this. Do you get me? A lot of people may see that advice as judging. If I'm telling my sister something, I've had this, you know, maybe I'll bring her on later on, but where it should be like, you're judging me, but it's like, no, I love you, It might sound harsh, it's truth, but I want you the better for you. I want the best for you, and you may not see it now, but you'll see it later. But that's there's a difference, and there's a little, probably for some people, a thin line between gossiping and judging.
I think it can be a thin line, because it's like, do we come at our siblings like, I understand where you're coming from, and I understand why you're doing the things that you do. I might encourage you to do something else. I might encourage you to try these things.
Right? The love. I struggled with that for a while, I'm gonna be honest.
It's difficult, and I'm not saying I'm not, I'd never judge anybody, and you know, sometimes like, I might even judge somebody based on like what their
the first impression or whatever. But you gotta,
but I don't understand why they believe what they believe, you know. So I mean, I don't try to judge anyone, but what I'm getting at is that, like, we oftentimes judge people who are homeless. There's a lot of stigma around that. And so even then, they might feel so stigmatized, they don't want to seek help. They don't want to ask their family and supports for help,
shame,
because they're going to...
the depression.
There's already people that are going to tell them things throughout their whole life. So that, exactly like you said, depression, traumas, anxiety, that you know, what is this person going to say about me? A lot of it has to do with mental health.
And I think, to go down and conclude this episode, I really want to talk about, and this is something that I'm going to emphasize throughout the podcast, we're going to talk about the dark stuff, the hard stuff, serious things, but I really want to wrap it around and end it with hope, with light, shedding light, and especially giving a spotlight to the important, I guess, lesson of each episode. But here, you know, we talked about the homeless situation, mental health. How can we avoid that? Or because people like them that are out there, that are homeless right now, they might have been where we are, comfortable, privileged, you know, we're able to go drive to Monterey, or, you know, go somewhere, travel, you know, to Costa Rica, wherever you want to go. You know, maybe they were at some point right there. You know, I know a lot of people that were millionaires and now they're not, you know. So what is your take on this, your insight, your perspective?
It's tough, because if I had the answer, maybe, like, if anyone had the answer, homelessness would not be an issue. If people had the cure to cancer, there wouldn't be no cancer, right? But I think that you never know. It could be any one of us. We could be privileged right now and then not in the future, and then there's hope, you know, like we can work our way back. You know. I would just say, you know, don't give up, because there are projects out there are resources out there sometimes, you know. Maybe I would just shout out to voters who are trying to pass things,
definitely,
for the betterment of others. And even though it might hurt, like, some taxpayers, you know, a lot of it is that I'm not trying to, you know, push anything. I'm just saying, like, there are are resources out there. If we want them, we can provide these to these people in need, those populations that need them, and then work our way back. Because even when we talk about mental health, and we talk about you know, being in a good mental space and seeking supports for that, I feel like even seeking supports for your mental health is a privilege, because I'm not going to go to therapy if I don't have my basic needs met.
Definitely.
You know, I need to meet my basic needs before I can even think about, you know, it's that hierarchy.
It's literally a rabbit hole too. Like, everything's a rabbit hole. But I totally agree. Like, that is something that, you know, we've been through tough things. You've been firsthand part of a traumatic part in my life in the past. I could have chosen to use a drug or whatever. I went 6 months without working after the tragic loss that I had experienced when I was younger. And but I had my family.
You had support.
I had support.
Yes.
I had people that were feeding me every day.
You know? There's a lot of people that don't have support. So it's not to say that someone who goes through trauma necessarily chooses, you know, to go a certain path. That might have been their only way to survive. Yeah, that might have been because you are very lucky. I'm glad, and it was a horrible thing that you went through.
Yes.
But luckily you are where you are now. I do hear of success stories, even though people go through maybe decades of substance addiction. And then this one time hits, this one time where they go to rehab. That one time may be the time that gets them out of their situation, gets them employed, gets them housed, gets them to be, an advocate for those that went through what they went through. So there are success stories out there. It could be any one of us, but also I don't want to lose that hope. And yeah, I think that would be my message is there's hope out there.
Definitely.
Don't give up. If you are struggling, if you are experiencing a mental health crisis, you can call, chat, or text 988 to speak with someone who's trained. Trained counselor is always there on that line, 988, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I just had a client last week who told me they benefited from that, from calling.
I love that. I'll put that as well in the caption.
Yeah.
As well for those people, my take on this, we got a different perspective. My perspective on this is definitely a spiritual one. It's definitely one where we need to hold on to faith, the one thing that we have inside. You can have a tent, you can be out there alone, you can have no support. I isolated when I was depressed, in a little room, rented it out. And for 3 months after that, I had to go back home to my family because I knew the cycle. If I continue this, I'm not going to get out of it. So also knowing, depression, knowing how it works, knowing how mental health, what we need to do to cope. So I have the tools already. So I'm like, I got to use them. I need to get out of this hole, A lot of people don't have that. But this is what this podcast is for, for those people, to help those people that are not listening to this podcast. Yeah. Those people that we're talking about, they're busy, living their life, trying to get better, trying to improve. But here, if you're listening to this podcast, you're more likely privileged. You're more likely like us. And it's time for us to help those people out. And it is a spiritual thing for me. My answer is God. That's it. People can go crazy like, oh, blah, blah, blah. There's no hope other than God. That's the only light in my world. That's what I saw when I fell in a hole. And if I didn't have my family, I would have been homeless. 6 months, no working. Who was going to feed me? Who was going to pay my rent? Who was going to, you know what I'm saying? And for some reason, and I still went to work and I still managed to pay a little bit of the rent. But after that, I was like, I don't want to work. That's how that was how bad it was. But I just wanted to finish up with the scripture, and I usually always do it based on the conversation, how it went. It comes up and I say it's God, or just simply what I've read, and it's a reminder like, oh, this is a good conversation. I would like to
nice.
And Google helps me with that because I don't have them memorized.
Oh, okay, of course.
But yeah, the book of Ecclesiastes, I cannot say that name. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 3, if I'm correct. Yes, if I'm not, please comment and correct me. But it is a time for everything. There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. What do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know what there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live. I know that there is nothing better. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, nothing can be taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him. And to fear him is to know him. You have to read the scripture to understand his heart, because a lot of people, especially Christians, we're bad representatives. True Christians deserve that name, but there's people that say they're Christian and they're bad representatives of who God is. Do you get me? Mm-hmm. And that's Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 3 all the way to verse 14. If you want to see it, I'm going to also link it down below on the Bible app. But this poem, this word, I loved it so much because that's what gave me kind of contentment, kind of peace when I went through the darkest parts of my life, because there is a time for everything. You know, we need to rest when we have to. We need to fight when we have to. And people can argue, oh, hate shouldn't exist. We need to hate what God hates. You think God loves people killing other people? You think God loves Christians judging their fellow brothers and sisters when they, especially if they confide in them certain things or whatever, and then they go turn around and stab them in the back or whatever the case is? You think God loves that, you know? Or that person that is a hypocrite trying to put an image up or trying to do, you listener, you that are listening, you know in your life what's going on. But this is something that I want to get out there, for us people that are privileged to seek God and see what is it that you can do for others, because when we see his heart, we start loving like he does. Do you get me? When we start hearing the word, when we connect to people. Now, we got resources here for the homeless, and if you are suicidal, you got a hotline there, or if you need help, you got a hotline that I'm gonna connect. Thanks to Melissa, she's gonna give me some links. But you also have a community of people that can feed you spiritually too, and it's people that have helped me. I needed the spiritual part of it. I had everything. I had my people feeding me physically. There was times where I had to, get bathed. I didn't want to shower. That's how depressed I was. But I needed more the spiritual part of it. Sorry, I'm going to cry. I needed motivation. And there's people out there that need that motivation. So that's what this podcast is for.
I do know a lot of churches that provide resources when they can.
Definitely.
To the homeless community. Mm-hmm. I hope that anyone who's listening wouldn't turn away somebody because of their homeless status.
Definitely.
Because it could be anyone. It could be like Kenya. Somebody like Kenya, somebody like myself. We have to see past our current situation and think about this person's story and everything that they've gone through. So just having that empathy, and there's people like us. So yes, to wrap it up, there is churches that help. I'll link you to a church that does that, donates every Saturday, helps here in Salinas, East Salinas as well. Connect yourself with people like that. If you want to donate, you can donate to churches that give, that donate. There's so many things, but this is what this podcast is for, to bring awareness, because a lot of us, we don't know about these resources, but this is what it's for the Salinas Valley residents, by Salinas Valley residents. And thank you again for listening, for tuning in. You can find us on YouTube, The Spotlight with KB. On Instagram, again, The Spotlight with KB. I'll link it down. But again, thank you. God bless you guys. Take very good care. And thank you, Melissa, for joining us.